Hello and welcome back to Patrons Golf. It is time for another major as we roll into Shinnecock Hills in Southampton, New York for the 126th edition of the US Open. This week will provide one of the biggest tests for golf this year as the US Open hits a course in its rotation that is situated on a large and very exposed piece of land, which kind of brings in all elements of the game. The numbers kind of speak for themselves here. Historically, Shinnecock is just one of those courses that kind of tests every strand of a golfer's game, physically and mentally. And yeah, this week is going to be no different. If we want to take a little bit of a look at the course, unfortunately, because this is not a regular PGA Tour rotation, I don't have the ability to do my usual course profile for it. So we don't have anything beautiful and nice to look like. And this means the players don't have the usual course ratings and whatnot, but that is not really much of an issue this week. Shinnecock's defense system, it's fairly well known with being wind, strategic angles, uneven lies, and sort of these difficult bunker complexes, which are large, deep, and really difficult if you're kind of missing your shots. The green complexes are very similar. They're large structures, but they play small due to the contours and the shapes that you see on every different hole. And I think one of the great aspects about the design of the course is the fact that they want you to have different wind conditions kind of in every hole. So every round is going to play very different as we go day to day. I think holes will play really hard most days, but you'll get some reprieve on some days based on what the wind is doing. Just some general background on the course. So as I said, located in Southampton, New York. Architect was William Flynn. Plays around 7,400 yards. It's par 70. The greens are a polar and bent grass blend, and the fairways are bent grass. This will be the sixth time that Shinnecock has hosted the US Open, with the last one being in 2018, where Brooks Koepka won. So the course itself, it sits on a very exposed sandy terrain, which is kind of near the Atlantic Ocean and the Peonic Bay. There's very few trees, and so players are essentially constantly exposed to these changing wind directions. The location of the course was specifically designed so that, as I said, so that players face these difficult wind angles throughout the round, and that's constantly changing. And look, when the wind does come, out to play, the club selection becomes extremely difficult to nail down, and approach shots, really struggle to hold the greens. And, a par on any hole here is just going to be maybe not even a good score. Maybe it's a great score. This is probably an event which is probably going to have a winner that's over par. If it's under par, there won't be too many that are shooting that. One difference we have from the 2018 US Open where Brooks won was the fairway width. With the fairways were narrowed prior to this event. That won't be the case this year. Um, the fairway mowing lines have also been, kind of slightly altered to extend closer to the bunkers, in order to bring them more into play and kind of increase the rollout off the tee. So despite the extra width, though, I don't think this is a course where you're just going to be able to bomb and go figure it out from there. Like, players will still need to be fairly precise. They'll need to have the right angles in. And look, even if you do hit a fairway, like, there's a fair chance that if you're giving yourself the wrong angle, it's going to be a bit of a mess and an uphill battle. Look, every hole at Shinnecock is hard and has its own challenges, but there's a few that I think I wanted to kind of touch on. The first one, which is the seventh hole, which is probably the most famous hole on the course. So the green slopes dramatically from, I've got a picture here for it, which kind of does indicate and show. This is just on the USGA website. It's really handy. It's got pictures from each hole to kind of illustrate some of the conditions that they'll face. But yeah, the green slopes dramatically from front to right and back to left. And yeah, it's heavily influenced by wind. Historically, this plays as one of the toughest Redden style holes in the world. So that's, if you don't know what that means, that basically refers to the shaping and the orientation of the green. So it's typically one that kind of slopes boldly from right to left or vice versa. The next one is the 11th hole, another par three, Hillhead, as it's known as. It's only 155 yards, but it does play significantly uphill and typically into the wind, which means that it changes that 155 yard number drastically. Most players kind of regard this as maybe one of the hardest short par threes to play in major championship golf. Next one is the 14th, which is a par four. It's the longest par four on the property, and look, it's a true championship hole. I think you can see this is a perfect photo to kind of illustrate what Shinnecock does and what it kind of leaves the players. You can see here there's massive bunkering and kind of like the soft landing spot from the tee, and there's uneven lies and like this thick rough, and it's going to be a brute of a hole. You're going to need to take driver, and you're probably taking like a long iron, or in some players' cases you're taking a hybrid in. It's a tough green complex as well, and like this is going to be a hole all week that I think is going to put some fairly big numbers. You're going to see some sevens. You're probably going to see some eights on it, and I do not envy having to face that potentially four times. The last one is the 16th par five pond, as it's known as. Look, typically in low scoring events, par fives are kind of that scoring outlet that players really need, but pond is a genuine three-shot hole. It's far from an easy challenge. You got strategic bunkering, which you can kind of see here, which this is probably situated where players are looking to have their second shot laid up, and I think this is going to be like the strongest test to even the best guys that usually eat up the par fives. It's uphill, as you can see how exposed it is just from this photo. It's a beautiful photo. Uh, this is not what you want for a par five. So I think well, three of those are on the back nine there. There's nothing about this course that is going to be fun this week. The weather. Now this is just the latest update. This has changed significantly over like the last 24 hours. I think as of right now, I don't see an AM or PM advantage. If I'm being honest, I'd say there's the potential for a delay. There's a potential for a stoppage. We've already seen I should probably try and get that actually. Let's see if we go. Let's see if I can get there. They have done something to the greens to, I guess, counteract what we're seeing. USGA. So they have watered down the greens. They're going to water down the greens. I think during the morning stint and before the afternoon stint, to kind of prepare for. I do anticipate that this is probably going to get a little bit worse. Uh, I think right now, this is the way I'm playing the first round. I couldn't find that tweet. That was a complete waste of time even mentioning that. But look, I think with the potential for a delay or a stoppage, like that's my pure speculation. I think like these wind gusts as they are, I don't think that they probably want anything higher than that. And I think if it does, I do think that there is some kind of a delay later in the day. And if we look at the Friday forecast, still not great, but it is much better. So I do wonder if there is a slight advantage if you're looking for one, and it's very subjective to say, but I'm going to throw some shots at some PM guys just based on the fact that we might be looking at a situation where guys get maybe six or seven holes in, it gets cold, and they're coming back the next day in much calmer conditions, and they're going to have a chance to play in. like wind gusts that are at least half the knots of what we're facing on Thursday. So I don't have any bets in yet. This is typically something I probably do kind of really close to the first group teeing off. I'm always looking at a price point over anything. I'm obviously going to favor guys that I like for the course, but I'm I'm always looking to take guys at bigger prices just because of how volatile the first round market is, but especially on a course like this. Like you're going to want to take some shots at some big guys. I think if my memory serves me correct, in 2018 it may have been Russell Henley who won it at one under. So look, it's guys are going to some guys are going to be at the around the mark and that are going to be massive surprises and that are probably going to be absolutely zero chance come Sunday. So I don't fault people for taking their shots at some guys at bigger prices that maybe bring a couple of different skill sets. Course success. Uh, I don't know. How do you genuinely model and a course like Shinnecock? I think it's a course historically which is broken the world's best, and you know players coming in at the top of their game. I think like the success here is looks simply like to survive. I think for me, it's going to bring the grinders into play, and I think that's what makes the US Open such a fun test because quite often we do have that, those grinders and players who most week in those massive birdie fests that for me are, complete snooze fests and not the type of golf that I enjoy. It brings them into play, right? And I think like JJ Spawn is like a perfect example of that. That's a guy who just kind of plods and grinds. The Open Championship's very similar. Brian Harman, another example of that. Um, with that said, I think the five kind of key stats for me this week, in order, strokes gained approach, strokes gained around the green, strokes gained off the tee, and then driver accuracy and bogey avoidance. Like ball striking is just at a complete premium. Like players are going to miss the greens constantly. Like it's just a reality, and everyone is going to need to rely on their short game to make some really difficult pars. So I want guys who've got really good touch around the greens. I'm not going to take. I'm probably not taking a massive shot. If I'm taking a shot at a guy who's probably not super strong around the greens, it's going to be a massively reduced play because I think that's going to be so important this week. The total driving still is going to play like a really large level of importance. Guys with distance are always going to have like a little bit of an advantage. Just being able to shorten some of the lengthier holes, especially into the wind. But I think it's like those guys who can keep hitting their spots off the tee, as I said before, right? It's not just hitting the fairways, it's hitting the right spots and hitting the right angles. They're going to set themselves up strongly for success. And with that said, I will throw it to, I've got five guys here that I kind of want to profile. I'm going to have more bets than that, but these are my five favorite guys at the price they're at. The first one is like, is this my favorite bet? And I've profiled this guy a number of times. I think I've spoken about him for this event and for the Open, and it's Chris Gotterup. Uh, Look, driving distance, shot shaping, creativity, his wind record as well, winning the Scottish Open, T3 at the Open. This is this is a guy who just genuinely ticks every single box for me, and I'm really excited. So you can currently get him, at 56. He's kind of around that 50 mark. He was floating at around 60s kind of earlier in the week, but I've seen a lot of action coming from him, so I'm not surprised to see him at some places a lot shorter than that. But this is a guy who's, you know, if we can get some, if we can get some accuracy off the tee this week, the approach, the around the green, the putting is gonna be good, and he's gonna have a chance. I think like I love the way he goes about his approach game. I've said this a million times. He changes his trajectory, he hits it both ways, and he does that in every single tournament, right? That's a guy who's a strategic thinker, and this is going to be a week where strategic thinkers really come through strong. So he's at this price, uh he's easily my favorite bet. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do this week. He was disappointing. Uh, he was disappointing, like kind of the few events that I've kind of tagged him in previously, like the Heritage. I yeah, I was kind of really interested in him, but like I saw enough in the during the Masters that really kind of got me excited for the rest of the majors, and I think this and the Open really suit his game so well. So I'm looking forward to him this week. Next guy we've got is Kurt Kitayama. This guy is just so sneaky good. It's not funny. His his driving ability is really a quiet advantage for him. In terms of driving distance, you can see there he's rated elite. Driving accuracy, you'll see this actually is a bit of a trend of the guys I'm betting. And I'll talk about it for my last two guys because it's probably more prominent for them. But look, the approach game, the putting, and the around the green stuff is not as good as typically as you would want. But I think at this price, like this is just a really good value bet for a guy who is one of the better drivers in the field. And his recent form too, like from the Masters, we've got, T8 at the Heritage, T9 at the Cadillac, and then, you know, so top 10 at the PGA. And to be honest, I don't think with how hard that PGA championship was, there is absolutely no discounting a top 10 there. So I love him at this price, from where I'll be betting him at. You can get 95s at Betfair, and that's a great spot for me to jump into. Next guy is another guy that I keep kind of bringing up. Is Colin Morikawa. Now, I was kind of tossing between him and Patrick Cantlay at kind of this spot in the market. They're kind of around the same price, but for me, it was. I think he is. I think he is healthy, and obviously he's the only one who kind of knows that. But watching him at the RBC, and even some of the stuff he said, right, like about talking about like I don't know, someone kind of I guess gave him like a motivational question for an event like this, and he was kind of like, yeah, I've always wanted to win like a national open, and I think like most people probably go into the RBC Canadian Open, maybe just using it as a good week for US Open prep, but I kind of love that mindset from him. And yeah, I think like the I think there's a bounce back from the PGA. I think he's fully healthy. His driver accuracy, his ball striking is elite, and I'm massive in on him this week. So yeah, I'm massively in on Colin this week. I think Cantlay's a good bet as well. I'm not going to talk about him, but I think he's. All right, next two guys. Now I put these two guys in the same bucket because I kind of alluded to it, but I've I've kind of got like three guys here who historically are not really good off the tee. Accuracy in the tee is kind of brutal, and I've put in the key stats for me is driver accuracy, which absolutely is the case. But look, with these wind conditions and just historically with how the course plays, I think there is an element of I think like off the tee play kind of I guess, levels out to some regard. I think like even the best guys are going to struggle at some point. Everyone's going to struggle, and so I think I'm kind of gonna I'm happy to take a shot on a couple of guys who tick a lot of the other key boxes, and at some good prices. And so the first guy is Hideki. Like he's approaching around the green play, complete separators from the pack. This price point is, I think, is perfect for me, and I think one of the things that kind of, I guess, sold me on him was at the PGA plus 5 strokes gained around the green and putting. This is a guy also like historically just plays so well at Augusta, and I know that those two courses are probably not like great course comps, but like they're two courses that play historically the hardest like on tour. So I think like I want guys obviously who played well at Augusta this week, and Hideki is one. As I said, great price point. You can see the off the tee stuff there is just brutal. It's As I said, it's gonna be a tough week off the tee for most. I think if he can hang in there, we're gonna be a really good shot because the approach game, the around the green stuff, and the putting is that good. So that's one guy that I'm happy to take a shot at this point. The other guy is Cameron Smith. Um, Look, this is this is an easy play for me, obviously, as an Australian guy who won an Open Championship, right? So we talked about with Chris Gotterup, the wind and kind of playing on those style courses, but he's around the green and putting. He's elite in both. Ranks first around the greens, ranks fourth in putting, and to be honest, he's made a change in coach and um, finished T seventh, losing almost 4 strokes off the tee. Like that's how good the rest of his game was that week. So he was very poor off the tee at a really tough course that punished you for that, and he was still in it. So look, I'm taking a shot at this point. His form seems to be much better on live after making the change in coach, and I think this is absolutely the type of shot you want to take at this price in the market. So yeah, that's my last one. As I kind of said earlier, with the first round leader, take your shots on your Cam Smith at 91, like first round leader. That's a massive price. Even Hideki 81, that's another massive price. These are the kind of guys I'm talking about for that market. It's so volatile, right? And they've clearly got some parts of their game that are going to keep them in it. And if you're not confident that it's going to hold on for the driver's going to hold on for the whole week, then take your shot first round. But yeah, those are 5 guys that I've kind of profiled. They're my favorite guys to profile this week. I'll have a lot more bets. We'll probably throw them up on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, look, that is all I'm going to dive into this week. Look, if you made it this far, you can probably tell I've been battling some kids in the background. But we're very thankful that they managed to let me do this. I'm excited for this week. Shinnecock is such a great place to watch golf. I love watching golfers struggle, and let's go Chris Gotterup or Cameron Smith. Anyway, thank you all for listening, as always, and yeah, speak to you next week after the US Open.